Michael Savage is based in San Francisco. We spoke to Richard Rappaport, who's a writer and journalist based there too, and he told me more about Michael Savage.
His show is called The Savage Nation, but his real name is Michael Weiner, so we refer to him as the Weiner Nation. And, he's a fourth-rater. He's a demagogue. He's utterly disregarded in San Francisco, of course, because, this is a very liberal city and a very liberal area, so he's just a fish out of water here. And, he has hundreds of thousands of followers around the country, but it's generally kind of the lowest form of right-wing conservatism in this country. I fear that you have and when I mean you, I mean the British, by sort of elevating him into the status of a civil liberties hero, is that you've made this guy who's a clown and not much else than a clown into somebody, who's got a real axe to grind.
Well, we're told by the Home Office that the reason that he is banned is because of some of the comments he has made about all sorts of people, all sorts of groups of people. What kind of things has he said?
Well, he's got on his website, there's a little slogan, I'd rather be waterboarding, for example. And, so what? He's just a nasty little piece of work, but if he was allowed on the air in Great Britain, he'd last 15 seconds, and people would get a sense that this man is worthless, and what he has to say is worthless, and certainly not worth making a federal case out of here. But I'm afraid that you've done that now. I live in the same town he does, and he's generally detested. Generally detested because of his views. Yeah, and because not just because of his views, but the way he presents them, which is simple-minded and without any subtlety. It reaches people who are not very smart, and that's kind of his audience.
And that's
rednecks, basically.
And that's 8 to 10 million rednecks, apparently. 8 to 10 million listeners he has. Is that correct?
Is it that many? Well, I guess that wouldn't surprise me much, but he is paid very little attention to.
Michael Weiner, Michael Savage, is on this list, and he says putting him on this list with Russian skinheads who are killing people and mass murderers who kill Jews on buses is defamation. He may have a point.
Well, I just happen to think he's utterly without talent. So he's got a PhD in psychology, and he uses it to talk down to people. His audience are fairly easily manipulated, as far as I can see. But defamation, I'm not so sure. I think him being on the list may defame all the others.
Well, he says he's unlikely to incite people to violence, and that's one of the reasons that some of these names are on this so-called banned list in the UK. Well,
and I suppose it's a cultural thing, but in America, I suppose we'd rather have people sort of speak their mind and get it out there.
From what you know of him, can you see any reason why he should be banned from coming to the UK?
No, I wish he'd go and stay there, frankly.
You've met him, of course. What was that experience like?
Well, I actually prevented him from being arrested, or at least restrained on an airplane flight between Tokyo and San Francisco. He just kind of went bananas and was just demanding and yelling and really giving the flight attendants a hard time. And I basically was just the seat in front of him. It started with dinner. He wanted salmon, and they had run out of salmon, so I gave him mine, which quieted him down a little bit. Anyway, after 10 hours of this, on the way out of the plane, the flight attendants gave me a couple bottles of champagne and thanked me because they said we were just about ready to restrain this guy. Now, if I had known who he was at the time, I wouldn't have stepped in.
That's Richard Rappaport. In a minute, we'll hear from someone who was on Michael Savage's radio show last week. First, Helen with the travel. It's 18 minutes past 10.
On 5 Live.
This just in, the chief executive of a speed camera company has today pleaded guilty at Sudbury Magistrates Court to speeding at more than 100 miles per hour on a dual carriageway in Newmarket. Steve has emailed victoria@bbc.co.uk. It's an insult to the population of this country that some people feel we have to be protected from strange or offensive views. Why can't we be trusted to decide for ourselves that these crackpots are crackpots? The people no longer trust the politicians because they show no faith in our intelligence and common sense. He's referring to the fact that Michael Savage, amongst others, an American shock jock, an American DJ, has been banned from entering this country, although the last time he wanted to come here apparently was 25 years ago. Anyway, Christopher Monckton is a former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, and he was invited onto Michael Savage's radio show when he was in the US last week.
He does not mince his words, does Michael Savage. He very, very plainly says what he thinks. I was interviewed by him for an hour last week when I had been due to appear in Congress to testify on the Republican side against Al Gore for the Democrats on the climate question. I was going to say there was no problem. Al Gore said there was. The Democrats, we believe for the first time in the history of Congress, refused the Republicans their choice of witness, and I wasn't allowed to testify. Michael Savage was fascinated by this story and had me on. And to give you an indication of his style, he repeatedly called Al Gore a liar throughout the program. Now, one may or may not think that's fair comment, but it's certainly, he doesn't pull his punches, shall we say.
Mm. What do you think of the fact that he is included on this list of 16 people who are banned ever from coming to Great Britain?
That is yet another of the many inexorable steps towards taking away the basic freedoms that we once enjoyed in the United Kingdom, for which this government has been responsible over the last 10 or 12 years. They've passed something like 90 criminal justice bills, the last of which was to take away the right of trial in serious criminal cases. And now here they are, taking away the right of free speech without even quite saying why. Various people have tried to work out what it is that Michael Savage has done to offend the Second Home Secretary, but unfortunately she hasn't yet given any clear reasons for her decision. And once again, in a free country, if you were going to take a decision as serious as to prevent the free movement of persons in and out of the country, then you would give a clear reason. After all, she also banned Mr. Wilders when he wanted to bring a film over to show in Parliament about how the Quran contains rather blood-curdling references to the infidel. And he, too, was stopped. And he's a European citizen with the absolute, unquestioned right to come here, whatever he wants to say.
The implication
we're in very dangerous territory here, I think.
The implication is that Michael Savage might incite people to violence, perhaps because of things like this that he's said, calling the Quran a hateful little book and a document of slavery, things like that.
Well, I certainly think that is strong language. But it might also be regarded as something which people should be free to say. After all, Muslims have said some pretty blood-curdling things about the Bible since they came to this country in very large numbers. Something like 2 million of them have come into the country since Labour took office, and they have not always been polite about the Bible. If you go into any mosque and listen to what is sometimes said, then racial hatred is being stirred up all the time, and Jackie Smith doesn't lift a finger. So it looks to me as though there's a certain amount of selectivity going on. I myself don't think it's appropriate to upset one's fellow citizens of different religions by using language like that. But on the other hand, I don't think that they should be banned from the country if they wish to do so.
Christopher Monckton, your views welcome, of course. Email victoria@bbc.co.uk, text 850. Let me read this email about Michael Savage. It's from another Michael who lives in this country. When I lived in the States, I listened regularly to Michael Savage's show. He's the American talk show host who is on the banned list. He can never come to the United Kingdom, according to the Home Secretary. Michael says, I found it thought-provoking, punchy, very, very direct. I was constantly amazed at the willingness of people to ring into the show just to receive a tirade of abuse from the host. That said, within his scattergun approach are contained some real gems, and I was inspired to read one of his books, Liberalism is a Mental Disorder. I recommend it to you. Basically, Savage is vilified for being an extreme right-winger, just as that other promoter of right-wing views in America, Rush Limbaugh, is condemned by the left. He's much gentler to his callers, and so I felt able to ring his show a couple of times. The Californian guy you interviewed implied that Savage only appeals to a sort of non-thinking underclass. Not true. I don't consider myself part of that constituency, and it's quite apparent that plenty of academics, professionals and other informed thinkers form part of his audience. I wish him well in his action against Jackie Smith, if only because she is such an odious, self-serving bigot. Right, let's talk about the first test between England and the West